We're talking about organic finds. This is papyrus. It's a reed that grows along the banks of rivers in the ancient world, especially the Nile. And if you take the reeds and you lay them flat and pulverize them, the material in the reed becomes a type of glue, and you can create paper. So papyrus is the paper of the ancient world. You can see the filaments that made up the reed there. In this case, it's got a nice Greek inscription in it. This is an example. These are the papyrus reeds here. Yes, sir. How is this preserved? Yeah, you can have papyrus preserved if the climate is very dry, or possibly if it's very wet. Generally, for organic materials to survive for hundreds, thousands of years, you need a condition where there's no moisture, which is very dry, or no oxygen, which is very wet. If you have a wet bog condition, all of the oxygen is used up by the bacteria, and once the oxygen is used up, the bacteria die. And when the bacteria die, there's no more decay. And so if you go to a bog, many times you can find organic materials, human bodies, leather, wood, that survive for thousands of years, and it's still intact. Same way with very dry conditions, where it's so dry that there's no moisture. Because if there's no moisture, there's no bacteria, no decay. Most of the papyrus that you find come from very dry climates in the Levant, and especially in Egypt. If you do textual type criticism and they talk about the early manuscripts, the vast majority of those are coming out of the colonies in Egypt because it's just so dry. Here's some more examples of papyrus. Here's one from Egypt. It has a cartoon on it. It's a political cartoon. Do you get the joke? Can you figure it out? That's a throne. The mouse is on the throne, and he's being served by the cats, which is crazy because cats eat mice. So you see the point. It's saying, why are we serving the rats? We should be eating the rats because we're cats. Anyway, examples of papyri. When you hear about manuscripts, oftentimes they're preserved in libraries, and if you actually see the originals, they preserve them in between sheets of glass that have been totally dehydrated, so you don't get any further decay. But if you ever went to study the actual manuscripts, you would be studying them under glass like this. This particular papyrus I want you to become very familiar with. It's called the Rylands fragment P52. And it's from the Gospel of John, and based upon the writing style, what they call paleography, it's dated to what's called Hadrianic, the time of Emperor Hadrian, which is early 2nd century. So you know what this little piece of papyrus means, right? It's from the Gospel of John. It dates from the early 2nd century. That means by the early 2nd century, the Gospel of John was in existence in Egypt, where it was found. And the reason that's significant for you to know is because there's a very common view among skeptics that Christianity was invented by Constantine at the Council of Nicaea, and that the Gospels were written hundreds of years after the fact by people who did not see the events. They just made it up wholesale. So you see the significance of this find, right? Because this little piece of papyrus suggests that the Gospel of John existed in the early 2nd century in Egypt. And if you studied the synoptics, what are the synoptic Gospels? Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Does anyone believe that the Gospel of John was written before Matthew, Mark, and Luke? No. Everyone's agreed that the Gospel of John is the latest of the Gospels. So you see what we've just done with this papyrus? Not only have we put John in the 1st century, we put Matthew, Mark, and Luke in the 1st century. So this one little piece of papyrus puts all the Gospels in the 1st century during the time of eyewitnesses. And so if someone's going to say that the Gospels are written in the 3rd or 4th century, hundreds of years after the fact, they've got to deal with this piece of evidence, because it doesn't. You can't have both. You can't write the Gospel of John in the 4th century and have this pesky piece of papyrus in the early 2nd century. And it was found in Egypt. And whenever they're dating papyrus, they have what they call migration period. So the events of the Gospels are taking place in Israel, but where was the text found? In Egypt. So that means it's going to take time for that text to migrate from the place of origin to Egypt. And so that's what puts it in the 1st century. It's the migration time. And some even say the paleography could put it in the 1st century. It overlaps the life of the Apostle John who wrote it in terms of the dating. And I've had some skeptics say it's a forgery, but I've never seen any kind of published information. And what I have found on it is that not only is it very accurate in terms of Hadrianic script, but they found things since the discovery of the Rylands fragment that show very clearly that it's from Hadrianic time. In other words, there were things that it shows that a forger couldn't have known whenever it was found in the 1920s. Okay. So what's it called? The Rylands fragment, P52. The P stands for papyrus. In other words, the Ryland fragments are a collection. This is P52, the 52nd papyrus in the collection. And it's significant. You should know about it. And if someone tells you that the Gospels are written after the 1st century, you'll want to bring it up. Yeah.
I think I remember you saying something last semester about specifically the part that was preserved.
Mm-hmm.
It said something specific that was very significant.
Right. It's this word right here in Greek is aletheia. And so not only is it from the Gospel of John, it's from the part where Pilate is talking to Christ, and he says, "What is truth?" I think I have the whole text. Yeah. So in other words, there's writing on both sides. This is verse 31 through 33. Then said Pilate to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." The reason this is significant, and I know I'm going to get mystical, but get used to it because I'm a mystical person. But what's interesting to me is that the papyrus was found in the 1920s, which is a time that the modernist movement was occurring in Europe and in America. The modernists are actually undermining much of the authority of revelation and Scripture. And so what better text to be preserved? You're going to preserve any part of the Bible. This is one of the best that you could preserve because it's a place where Pilate is asking Jesus the truth. What is truth? And that's what they're arguing about in the 1920s with the modernist movement, is what is truth. So it's almost like God's responding, right? And allowing this little piece of papyrus to be dug up. And you see what's preserved there, judge him by your own law. And that's what's happening in the modernist movement. They're taking the Son of God and they're judging him by their own principles. That man will be the measure of all things. He's going to figure everything out with his own mind. And so he's going to proofread and evaluate Scripture and Revelation and which civilizations have been built. The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put any man to death." This was to fulfill the word which Jesus had spoken to show by what death he was to die. Pilate entered the praetorium again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" So that's what's preserved on one side. On the reverse side, Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. For everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" That's very significant in terms of what's happening in history in the 1920s. And so to me, it just seems kind of uncanny, doesn't it? That they find a piece of papyrus that puts all the Gospels in the 1st century, and the piece that they find is that statement. And what's even more fascinating to me is that it's not this truth that's preserved. It's actually this truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. So the part that's preserved, this aletheia, is the part where it says, "Whoever hears my voice." Whoever hears my voice. College.